morning, Dynamics SL users. My name is Jim Gross. I'm a Senior Project Manager here at NexTec Group, and I'm going to walk you through the Dynamics SL year-end closing. So to start with, we're going to be looking at some different items here for the agenda, basically what's new for 2020. We're going to talk about some year-end updates, module closing procedures, and some common errors and issues. So let's go ahead and get started on this. There have been some 1099 changes that most of you are aware about. The IRS made a change to the form for reporting non-employee compensation. This new form is called the 1099 NEC, and it's going to look basically what's the difference in the 1099 NEC. Well, as of January 1st, 2020, all non-employee compensation is to be reported on the 1099 NEC in lieu of the 1099 miscellaneous form. Any vendors that were historically being reported as 1099 MIS, box 7, are now to be reported as 1099 NEC using box number 1. The accelerated filing date of the 1099 NEC is January 31st, 2021. And the 1099 miscellaneous form has been redesigned. It can no longer be used for reporting non-employee compensation. So when you look at the form here, this is the new one, and you're going to see that in 2020, you're going to be using a completely different form. And again, you can get these at your local office supply stores. So any of the 1099 miscellaneous forms that you've had for years past can no longer be used. If you're going to be reporting any non-employee compensation. You see now on the right that the box 7 is now used for direct sales in the 1099 miscellaneous form. So again, please consult your accountants and make sure that you get the right forms to file for year 2020. Okay, now jumping over, we've talked about this in the past, and I'm going to just highlight this real quick, that in 2016, the Affordable Care Act forms were required for 2016 reporting and any year after that. I'm not going to read through this slide. It's pretty self-explanatory. Each of you will be getting a copy of this slide deck as well, so that you have this for reference. In the Affordable Care Act, there's some different forms here for health coverage, transmittal of health coverage information returns, employer-provided health insurance officer and coverage, transmittal of employer-provided health insurance. All these are listed on the pages here. And if you have any questions regarding this, again, please contact your payroll consultant, or if you have any other questions for us, please let us know. As far as the W-2 form, there was no changes for this year. So you're still good to use your W-2 forms. You can still file them electronically or on paper. If you've never filed them electronically, please make sure that you contact somebody at NexTec, and we can provide you information regarding how to file them electronically in Dynamics SL. The other thing is we support the new box code 12GG in positions 122 and 132, and we support the new box code for qualified equity grants as well under Section 83I. There's some additional box codes that have been changed as well over the years. You can just continue to use those. As you've done in the last few years. I believe everything has stayed the same in the last few years as well. So here's some important dates to remember. February 1st, 2021 is the due date to mail recipient copies for W-2, 1099, and 1095. February 28th is the due date to send the paper format of a 1099 and 1095 filing RRS for the IRS. February 28th is also the due date to send the paper format of the W-2 federal filing. And March 31st is the due date to send the e-file format of W-2, 1099, and 1099 filings. The Form 1095 does not need to be filed at the state level. So again, keep these dates in mind as you get ready for year end. So some year end updates. Changes have been made. As you have done in the past, if you're on current version 2018 for Dynamics SL, you can download your year-end updates on the customer source. The changes that have been made now is if you are on a 2011 version or 2015 version, those are no longer supported in Main Street, and you will not be receiving the regular year-end updates from Microsoft. But our partners, which is Plumline, which is the developer of the SL product, has a package to help with this. So if you are not on SL 2018, then you will need to contact Plumline to be able to buy the year-end support package or year-end update package. And what you're going to see is it's going to be including the ability to have two sets of tables, standard and high withholdings for state deductions, allow different marital status for state and federal deductions and exemptions and credits, the new 1099 NEC form, the updated 1099 miscellaneous form, and there's a subscription price to this. So if you're less than 100 vendors or employees, then the price for this package will be $2,500 a year. If you're more than 100 vendors or employees, then it's going to be $3,000 a year. And it does not include the installation services. So what we need to understand is if you are not on version 2018, you cannot go to Customer Source and download the year-end updates. You will have to purchase those through Plumline. And if you need help with that, please contact myself at NexTec, or you can contact Janine Warner, who is our customer service advocate for SL support as well. So let's talk about some of the year-end considerations. Fiscal versus calendar year, tax reporting is done on a calendar year basis. Payroll and accounts payable modules both require calendar year-end processes at the end of December, no matter what period is assigned. So even if you are a fiscal year and you don't close out your year at the end of the year, you still have to do a year-end process in payroll and accounts payable. You can continue to post entries to prior periods, even if they've been closed, including a year-end close. And the W-2 and 1099 forms are updated based on check dates, not the period to post. So make sure you understand that it's looking at anything that's been cut through the end of this year. As far as your receivables closing, you'll continue to review your accounts receivable files to ensure that all the documents for the period are entered. You can print or review the AR batch register. You can run the general ledger post transactions. You can print or review the customer trial balance and general ledger trial balance to make sure that they match. And you can also print your aged AR report, run the customer detail, and then print a report for file. You'll close the AR module for the year in the general ledger closing. So keep in mind that if you are a sales order client, the sales order module is closed when the accounts receivable module is also closed. Keep in mind that you cannot close the module if you have any unreleased batches for the period. Okay, very similar on the payable side is you'll again review all your open accounts payable files, making sure that everything has been entered, released, and posted. Print your batch register, post your transactions in the GL module, and then you can print or review the vendor trial balance and the general ledger trial balance to make sure they match. You'll always want to print your check register and aged AP if you are finished for the month, and keep those on file for as well. Now, if you're closing the year, the closing process sets the current year and period to the first period of the new year. It also establishes the new year beginning balances for each vendor. So if you have any changes that you need to make for 1099s, we'll discuss that in a few slides here. Keeping in mind that for those of you who are using the purchasing module, that is also closed when the accounts payable module is closed. Okay, 1099 processing for AP. Make sure that your vendor 1099 amounts can be manually corrected, but you have to be in the initialized mode in the vendor maintenance screen. So for those of you who have not done this before, you have to have all other screens closed. You have to turn on initialized mode. Then you can go into the vendor screen and update your 1099 amounts for certain vendors that need to be corrected. 1099 amounts are calculated based on check dates. If you need to, you can run the AP integrity check, which will rebuild the 1099 history using the document history. There's also some tools available for rebuilding 1099 information for paid vouchers that were not originally entered as 1099 vouchers. So if you have some of those, the best way to do that is turn on initialize mode, go into the vendor maintenance screen, pull up that 1099 vendor, and then you can type in there what the 1099 amount should be. The preview report will contain all 1099 vendors regardless of the limit amounts. So I know many of you have everything set at $600. If you've got 1099 vendors that are under that $600 threshold, they'll still print out on the 1099 preview report. And then the forms, the 1099 forms, the new NEC and the old miscellaneous form, will only print forms for those vendors who exceed the limit amounts. So some of the 1099 issues common. Current 1099 year is purged by mistake, and that's done in the AP module. Some other issues, System 532, date must be in an open 1099 year. So please make sure that you go in and update the 1099 year close in the AP module and make sure that you have the current year established. 1099 balances are incorrect for a vendor. A number of issues can come up with this. If the vendor was not set up as a 1099 vendor, or one or more vouchers were entered to an incorrect 1099 box number, or a check has not been issued for a 1099 voucher. Again, all those things can be corrected using initialize mode and enter the correct 1099 balance in the vendor maintenance screen. Okay, some resources for troubleshooting. I'm not going to go through these. Some of these may no longer be on the customer source website, but if you just type in the search box, company information is incorrect, forms did not align correctly, 1099 year checklist, you should be able to find some support articles. And if you can't, please let us know at NexTec and we can provide those resources to you. So moving into the sales order closing. Sales order closing consists of inventory, order management, and purchasing modules, as they are all closed together as soon as possible. Purchasing and order management do not have their own closing function. As I mentioned in the previous slide, order management is part of accounts receivable, purchasing is a part of accounts payable. To promote the proper matching of revenue and cost, accounts receivable sales batches and inventory cost of goods sold batches use the invoice date to determine the period to post. Both the sales and cost of goods post to the same fiscal period. So when you run, if you're using a sales order and you run your closing process there, everything should get posted to the accounts receivable and inventory batches on the same date. So please make sure that you understand that, and that's running your order confirmation. Print the sales journal report. That's done every day. Most clients do a sales journal either on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. Make sure that those are all been run for the month and everything's been printed to ensure that all your transactions have been posted to the correct modules. Okay, the purchase order closing. Again, this is done through accounts payable. So you'll get the default fiscal period from the accounts payable module, and it's also tied to inventory because you'll be releasing batches. First thing I would do is review your open receipt files to make sure that all documents for the period have been entered, released, and posted. Use your PO receipts edit report or your batch register to check for any open receipt batches. And then you complete the releasing of those batches that you've discovered, and or you can void those batches if they should not be posted. Use the closing window in the GL module to close accounts payable, which also closes purchasing. If most of you have accounts payable, but if some of you do not, then you would also close the purchasing module through the inventory module. So some useful reports to help you troubleshoot: purchase order status history, the purchase order register, the receipts registered, and the applied vouchers. These will all tell you what's been open, hasn't been closed yet, anticipated deliveries, if you will, and then also any vouchers that have been applied over to accounts payable if you're using the create voucher upon receipt. And then to trace any relationship and tie between purchase orders, receipts, and vouchers, you can use those same reports as well. There's an additional one called the PO AP batch cross-reference report, and that will show you what was entered in the PO and applied to an accounts payable voucher in the AP module. Okay, jumping over to inventory. Inventory, basically you're there, same thing. You're going to review all open inventory files to ensure that all documents, sales, receipts, adjustments for the period have been entered. If you are doing physical inventory counts in SL, you should also make sure that there are no open inventory count batches but they've all been entered and they've all been reconciled and closed out as well. You can use the inventory edit report or the inventory batch register to check for any open inventory batches. If the order processing module is being used, coordinate the closing process with the AR module. And the reason for that is when you run your sales journal, remember that it creates an accounts receivable transaction and it also creates an inventory issue transaction. So you want to make sure that those are tied together. Complete the release of any open inventory documents, and then you run the GL modules post-transaction to complete that. And then for balancing, you can run the inventory valuation and the general ledger trial balance for all inventory accounts. This will help you tie your subledger to the general ledger and make sure if there's anything that is not reconciled, that you can adjust it through an inventory batch or you can adjust it through a GL batch. Biggest challenge to closing inventory is reconciling to the general ledger. Some of the common causes that we see for out of bounds conditions are the general ledger journal entries made to inventory accounts. We've seen this in the past where clients have made a journal entry to reconcile, if you will, or to tie out to the inventory module. But the problem with that is it's more of a one-sided entry. It's happening on the general ledger side, but you're not getting corresponding entry on the inventory side. So I would definitely avoid doing that. You may have some drop ship purchase orders that were coded to inventory accounts. As you may or may not know, when you create a drop ship inventory transaction, typically that means that you're not going to receive the items into your inventory. But if you code those to an inventory account, you've never fully received those into the system, they will cause an imbalance as well. The other one would be a landed cost item that might have been paid through accounts payable and charged to an inventory account. Typically, again, landed cost, if you're using that function, you code that to a landed cost account. Okay, we don't have a lot of clients that use payroll, but for those of you who do, you know that closing payroll takes a lot of effort. So we want to make sure that you understand that even if you are a fiscal year client and you don't close your year for 12/31, there still is a year-end closing option in Dynamics SL that you have to do for payroll. Year-end closing creates new deduction records for the next calendar year based on the current year. And payroll checks may still be processed and released for the closed year by using a check date in that year. So if you have to run a post-year payroll, maybe for bonuses or for something that you may do at year end, as long as the check date is in the previous year, you're still good. Any calculations from the current year should either be processed or cleared prior to closing the year. Tax table updates for 2020 will be available for download around December 21st. Again, keeping in mind what I told you in a previous slide, that if you're on SL 2018, you'll download this through Customer Source. If you're on a prior version, you'll have to go through Plumbline. These should be loaded after the payroll year-end close has been completed. And then the tax table updates are separate download from the year-end update. So please keep that in mind. W-2 calculations can be run at any time and can be run multiple times. So if you need to make corrections, you can certainly do that as well. You use the employee W-2 history screen to review the results of the W-2 calculation process. And if you have to go in and make any changes to it, then you can do that for any of your employees. So you can use the maintenance screens and recalculate W-2s for all employees. Some errors require initialization. So if you're not familiar with initialization, as I mentioned before, all of the screens must be closed. You turn on the initialize mode, and then you can go into the employee W-2 history screen and make any corrections that you need to. Typically, it's due to incorrect setup of tax-exempt deductions and adjustments for taxable items, such as taxable use of a company automobile, taxable life insurance benefits, and so on. Your final W-2 calculation must be done when all payroll data has been entered and released for the calendar year. It can be done either before or after payroll is closed for the year. If you choose to do the magnetic media file, make sure that everything has been resolved there. And then electronic filing of W-2 data is support for federal filing only. Most, but not all states will accept a MAG Media file created by Microsoft Dynamics. Dynamics does not have a copy 1 or copy 2 report format. Use copy D only, and Dynamics XL uses a standard 2-part W-2 form. If you don't have these, you can typically get them through an office supply store, but if you can't find any, make sure that you contact us at NexTec, and we will make sure to get you in touch with those. Okay, some common payroll closing issues. System message 6960, check date calendar year cannot be changed in the calculation screen. This can happen after closing for the year, but there is an unfinished payroll calculation from a prior year. To fix that, you just run a clear calculation, but we also have a KB article that would be more support for you as well. State wages do not match federal wages on the W-2. Again, there's another KB article that goes into more detail, but it could be a pre-tax deduction was set up for federal withholding, but not for state. The state deduction is not attached to all earnings types. Multiple state deduction IDs are set up for the employees, which can cause state wages to appear double, so on and so forth. Again, way to correct that, verify correct current setup, manually correct the numbers in the employee history or an employee W-2 history with initialize mode turned on. And then there's a KB article to assist with that as well. A couple more, tables, fields, and formulas. Wages on payroll W-2 forms are not reduced by pension amounts. State wages are doubled on payroll W-2 forms. These are all pretty common issues that come up. There's some KB articles, and again, if you can't find a KB article, you can use the search function in customer source, and if you still can't find it, please let us know, and we'll be sure to assist with these. Okay, so lastly is going to be your general ledger closing procedures. General ledger is always the last module to be closed. Payroll always closes for the year in December, regardless of your fiscal year setup. So once general ledger is closed for the year, you can still post batches to prior periods and prior years. Now that's a setting in the GL setup screen that will allow you to post to previous periods. You verify a closing process for all other modules other than general ledger has been completed. As we talked about in the previous slides, you got to make sure that AP, payroll, purchasing, inventory, sales order, any of the other modules must be closed prior to closing your general ledgers. You want to make sure that your current fiscal period and year has been entered. Print and review the reports to review for any open or unposted batches. And those are going to be your GL transactions using the unposted module or unposted feature, and then your GL batch register. Verify any allocation entries have been generated and posted for the month. And also, I would say any of your recurring entries that you would have for any recurring transactions. Print your trial balance report. Confirm your account balances equal to balances on supporting documentation. So these are going to be things like bank reconciliations, fixed assets, any accrual worksheets, your subsidiary ledgers tying out to inventory and the other modules as well. Make sure you compare the beginning balances for the period to last period's ending balances to make sure no other entries were made to prior periods. Enter and post any transactions that arise from the above review. And then if you are using consolidation features, make sure you process and create your consolidation files. And then lastly is you're going to print and review the trial balance and detailed general ledger reports. You'll want to print and review your financial statements, and then you want to close the general ledger module. So what does closing the year end do in general ledger? Well, it sets the current period to the first period of the new fiscal year. It establishes beginning balances for the asset and liability accounts for the new year. It zeroes the income and expense accounts and closes the year-to-date net income account into your retained earnings account. And then lastly, it retains the year's period to date and year-to-date history. So some common issues with GL closing. Module can be closed due to unreleased batches, pending check batches. So if you didn't go through the entire process in AP, you may have an open check batch that needs to be closed as well. And then there's also a year-end checklist KB article as well, and you can just type that in your search engine. So that concludes our slide presentation for your Dynamics SL year-end closing.